From Unity of Houston, Texas, this is The Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational spiritual community providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress now with Reverend Howard Caesar.
So have you ever walked into a room with some purpose in mind and completely forget what that purpose was? Oh, you too, huh? Okay. Well, it turns out that doors have something to do with that. Psychologists at the University of Notre Dame had done a study, and they discovered that passing through a doorway actually triggers what's known as an event boundary in the mind. And it's separating one set of thoughts and memories from the next. And so your brain files away the thoughts that you had in the previous room and prepares for you a blank slate for the next room. Isn't that interesting? That's what they found out. So you're not going crazy when that happens. But I share that with you because today I want to talk about doors. And I know we go through a lot of doors, physical doors, you know, and we open many, we close many, what have you. But I believe that there is a door that we are all intended to walk through to a more full, more rich experience of this we call life. That there is a depth to the experience, a depth to life, a depth to who we are, a depth to greater love, greater peace, greater joy, that exists beyond the bounds that we have known. I think as being a minister, and you're no different than I am, I just have always sensed that there's a boundary line in consciousness that I have to push beyond, that there's something more. And sometimes it escapes us, this door that is there. And maybe we're not willing to walk through it. It may be that we have unconsciously kind of barricaded the door that leads to something greater, something more than we're able to see ourselves as being. And there's just more to life. Webster's Dictionary actually talks about a door, and it says it's a swinging or sliding barrier by which an entry is closed or opened. Okay? And there are lots of references to doors. There's the door to the mind. There's the door to one's feelings. There's the door to one's soul. There's the door that is to one's life. And so the door is always opening or closing, that you and I have that control in consciousness as to what we're saying yes to, what we're saying no to. So we either open our mind, open to feelings, open to life, or we have a barrier, and we have a barrier sometimes to new ideas, a barrier to feeling our feelings. We may want to numb out as opposed to feel what's there, and so as a result we have a barrier really to the fullness of life in various ways. We may not be conscious of that, what's going on. You know, I was looking up in the Bible Concordance, which gives you all the different verses in the Bible that have the word door in it. And just prior to listing all those passages, it gives a little definition of what a door means biblically. And this is what it said. It said, besides the common uses as the entrance to a house or building, this word is used metaphorically as the entrance to anything. It gives an example in Scripture where it says the door of faith, and it says that means really opportunity, that there's a door that leads to a greater opportunity to demonstrate some capacity, some attribute of God. Now, Jesus had something to say about a door, and one of the most powerful things that he said, I believe, is when he said, behold, I have set before you an open door, and no man can shut it. Behold, I have set before you an open door, and no man can shut it. That means, basically, in your life, there is a door that leads to something greater. There is no person, no thing, no situation, no circumstance that can ever shut the door, that you have a dimension of your being that can show up if you walk through that door and stand in that dimension of who you are. And it matters not what's going on externally in your life, that basically you are the only one that would shut that door. No one else can, no person, whatever they say, whatever they do, whatever life does, whatever you encounter, nothing can shut the door but you. because this higher self, this Christ, has put before you an open door to step through. And so this, our elder brother, our wayshower, Jesus, our teacher, is telling us that there is a door that leads to something more and something greater, something more fulfilling. And we either block it, close it, or we step through it. And, you know, some of you are familiar with the individual Buckminster Fuller. Some of you heard of him, read about him. He was considered a genius in the 20th century, and brilliant man, innovative, an inventor, designer, deep thinker, amazing individual. And he was the one that created the geodesic dome, and he discovered what was called synergetics. And anyway, he was born in 1895. And he wrote a book when he was in his mid-80s. And the book that he wrote was called The Critical Path. The Critical Path. We're all on a critical path. And anyway, when he was 12 years old, he had started a kind of a chronological record of his life. And he called it the Chronophile. The Chronophile. And there was so much that was being invented and so much that was being created around the time of his birth and his early years. And so he kind of was keeping track of that. The first automobiles were introduced back then when he was very young, wireless telegraph, x-rays, all kinds of things. And so when he was 7 years old, he saw his first automobile. And when he was 12, he drove his first automobile. That was before, you know, the law said you can't drive until you're 16. Anyway, but when he was 9, when he was 9 years old, the airplane first became invented. And he didn't see one flying in the air until he was 14, and he flew in one when he was 22. But all of these very surprising and first ever things that were happening in his life were experiences that had a cumulative effect. And it's why he started what he called the Chronophile. And it was basically a lifelong study of himself, a research project on himself that had a cumulative effect having to do with the changes in life, the changes in society. And he was convinced, even at a young age, that a much greater environmental and ecological change was beginning to take place in his generation's experience, to the degree that it was greater than the cumulative experience, he said, greater than the cumulative experience of 4 generations, greater than the cumulative experience of his father, his grandfathers, his great-grandfathers, and his great-great-grandfathers. That's what he saw it to be. And he read all of their diaries dating back to the mid-70s. Anyway, the point that he made is that life continually alters the environment, and it basically then begins to alter the potentials, the realities, and the challenges that we face in life. Everything is different today than it was back then. All kinds of things are being invented. Things are happening around us, and it alters, really, potentials, realities, and challenges that we experience in life. And that was the point that he made. And he measured everything. He was a mathematician, so he was very analytical. One of the things he said was, at 85, I have taken in over 1,000 tons of air, food, and water, which temporarily became my flesh. I don't know why that was important to him, but that is what he was measuring. He also said, you and I seem to be verbs, evolutionary processes, movement. And he said, are we not integral functions of the universe? So we're integral functions of the universe. He was a brilliant man. And he talked about how fast we are moving at all times, whether we're aware of it or not. Again, this was a scientific man. And just listen to the analogy that he gives. He said, if we live at or near the latitude of New York City, it doesn't matter where you may live, but New York City as an example. He said, we are whirling around the Earth's axis at 800 miles per hour. And at the same time, the Earth itself is zooming around the sun at 60,000 miles per hour. And at the same time, our solar system rotates at hundreds of thousands of miles per hour. You're just sitting there and you think you're not moving. You are so wrong. It's a blur. It's a whoosh. Externally, you don't realize, we're not aware how fast we are moving through this universe. The amount of movement is absolutely astounding. And yet we're not aware of that. It's happening. It's happening. And so if you look at life externally, there is literally no way that you can stand still. Okay? And as Buckminster Fuller referred to it as spaceship Earth, we are moving at an amazing speed, that it's all about dynamic movement. We live in a universe where it's about dynamic movement. It's continually moving toward perfecting and improving things in the physical realm, whether it be improving and expanding travel, from an automobile to an airplane to a jet to a rocket ship to the moon, or communication, the internet, whether it be the quality of life. All these energies are often spent on perfecting and improving things in the external, and that's all good. However, it makes sense that this improving and perfecting dynamic is also meant to go on internally, and that the Earth's movement and all this movement of the universe is really a metaphor for the movement that is intended to also be going on internally in consciousness. We are not to be at a standstill in consciousness, but we make the choice and decision. We determine whether we're going to walk through that door and really get in motion. We are the ones that have choice on this. It's very important to recognize and take ownership of that. And that realm is a whole new world, and beyond that door, once you step through it, and it's something that's good, because basically what you'll find is a dimension of you as a spiritual being. You'll begin to experience a higher self, a presence, a special destiny that has been birthed in you, that is beyond the physical stuff and beyond the resumes and beyond the gratifications of egos. And there's a whole nother dimension to you beyond what you see. Just as you don't see the world whirling and going, there's something that wants to move you through a door and keep going. And it's our true self. It's another reality. It's a larger reality. And so Jesus wouldn't put it out there. He wouldn't have told us about it if there wasn't that door into another reality and dimension that exists right now. Just as we're in motion physically, right now, there is a door that leads to another reality of you, another dimension of you. And I absolutely, totally believe that. Now, sometimes we get it in bits and pieces, but there has to be a willingness on our part. So the question we'd ask ourselves is, how open are we to going beyond the status quo? To how much are we open to really feeling and experiencing life on deep levels? How open are we to stepping into higher energies and higher frequencies and recognizing and leaning on into it? There's a guy named Daniel Goleman. He's an author. He tells about an experience that he had in New York in the mid-'70s. And it was a hot, steamy August afternoon in New York City. It was just a sweaty day in which people are just kind of sullen and sulky and not too happy about their discomfort and all that. Anyway, he was heading back to his hotel. He jumped on a bus, and he was startled when the driver, he said, a middle-aged black man with an enthusiastic smile, welcomed him and said, "Hi, how you doing?" And he was kind of startled and kind of didn't know quite how to respond. He was sweaty. He didn't feel so great. And then he noticed all the other people he greeted the same way coming on the bus. They were startled, and they were locked into their heavy mood, and few of them returned any kind of message to him. They were, have you ever been in the experience where, you're just kind of you're out of sorts, and somebody comes along and is going to be happy and radiant, and it's kind of like, just let me be in my problem. Just let me stay here, okay? Just go away, You've had that, haven't you? But this guy was relentless, and and so he was greeting everyone and trying to move them out of the mood that they were locked into, and trying to move them through a door. And so all through the city, as the traffic got bad at periods of time, he would give a running monologue of the city and what was going on there. And he would say, "Oh, and we're passing a scene here. There's a store right over there. They're having a great sale. You ought to circle back, and they have some great stuff." And he would say, "Oh, and there's an exhibit in the museum up here, and there is, and there's a movie playing at the cinema. It's a wonderful movie." So he just kind of, all this was going on, and this Daniel Goleman, this author, said the whole bus was transformed, and that he got people to shake out of that, "Leave me alone, I want to be in my problem. It's hot, it's sticky, it's whatever." And so everyone, as they left the bus, he said, "So long, have a great day." And now people responded and smiled back, and there was a response. And he took them into another frequency. There was a ripple of good that was happening because he was able to step through a door and be a dimension of himself that is another part of the reality of who he is, and remind people that's who they are too, because we all want to be that. We really do. And so some people are willing to step through that door. Others board the door up, and those who board the door up to these kinds of things, those who are closed off, are people who are suffering. They stay in their suffering. The more we close off to life, the more we close off to those kinds of energies that are trying to move us out of our little lower energies, we stay in our suffering. And so only we are the ones that can open or close that door. As Jesus says, no one, nothing can close that door but you. And the open door is basically openness itself, being an open individual. Are we open to the full range of experience here in life? Are we really fully open to the divine? Are we really open to having just a more fulfilling experience of life? Many of us, I think, have a hard time accepting what lies beyond the grasp of our intellect. We get stuck in our mind, stuck in our intellect. Right now, in every now moment, we are either opening or closing. Every person you encounter, every situation, as you leave here today, every moment basically is a yes or a no. I'm open or I'm closed. And to the degree that we hold back and sometimes are waiting, sometimes we're waiting for something, and we're waiting for life to change instead of stepping through the door and being it. And as long as we're waiting, basically we may stay in our suffering or some degree of it. And we are really cheating ourselves. And so everything we do really ripples out and affects everyone, transmitting a message, transmitting an energy, transmitting a state of being, transmitting a state of consciousness. And we do it with our posture, we do it with our breathing, we do it with the words we speak, we do it even with a glance and how we look at other people. The philosopher Goethe, he once said, "What you are speaks so loudly I cannot hear what you say to the contrary." In other words, you may be saying something, but what I'm feeling from you is something else, that I can't buy what you're saying. There's a guy named Winifred Gallagher, and he's a journalist. He's written some books, and he has said, that's what I've done all my life, is write. And he came to this realization that what he does is not something as a writer just to pay the bills, but it is his contribution to life's grand design, to the grand design, which creates personal experiences, and connections with others that would otherwise be sometimes not possible. And so this can be true for anyone, that we're making connections and creating experiences with one another. Whether you're a teacher, a cab driver, whatever your profession, basically what one does has not changed in you, but how one does it, how one lives their life, how one is being, on the surface, our life may look the same, everything we're doing is the same, but inside, if we make a shift and walk through a door, everything feels different. There's a wonderful story that this author, he's written a book called Spiritual Genius, and he talks about a meeting up that he had with a Buddhist monk. And I'll read to you this experience for him. He said, "On a hot afternoon in India, I was trudging up a hill, feeling very cross and jet-lagged, when the stooped, aged Buddhist monk teetered toward me. Hands outstretched, he seemed like yet another person in a poor country who wanted something. As he drew closer, however, I saw that the monk was offering me a cookie from a small packet. At first, I was startled by his generosity. Imagine a person whose reaction to getting a package of cookies was to go out on the street and start handing them to strangers. When I met the monk's smiling eyes, however, I saw that I was no stranger, and neither was he. Looking into his face was like peering at the sun, yet I couldn't turn away. I was transfixed in the field of awareness and bliss that radiated from this fragile figure. Without a word, the monk did what spiritual geniuses do, remind others of some things that we somehow just know, but sometimes forget. He repaired my fragmented view of life's grand design. He demonstrated that there's more to a person and more going on than our sometimes shallow and cynical perceptions suggest. He showed me that the sacred isn't just up there or in some afterlife, but right here, right now. And he revealed the truth that underlies the truths of different cultures. He offered living proof that practice makes perfect. And he made me want to be more like him. We bowed and beamed ecstatically for a few moments, and then the little monk continued on his way, offering to all comers, none of them strangers, his cookies and his spiritual genius, which, like a magnet, drew their own spiritual genius to the surface. In every moment, we are opening and closing. He almost closed the door on his first perception of this man who approached him. But that man had an energy, he had stepped through the door and helped him through it as well. That's a part of what we're called to do, you know. Right now, we are choosing in every moment to open ourselves, either more fully to the moment, or we're waiting, or we're turning our back on what is there in the moment. Our true destiny is often said that we're here to love, and we all know that we're all holding back to some extent on that. Everyone is in varying degrees. I admit that myself. I still have a long ways to go. But we're in the process, we're in the journey, and many of us have kind of an imagined life that we want to live, that we're waiting to open to, like sometime we'll get there. And when we resist any aspect of the moment that we're in and close off, whether we're closing off to emotion, to a person, to a situation, basically we're creating a separation and a level of suffering. And so opening and openness is a person's most fundamental feeling as a being, is opening to the moment and to the bliss that is always really there. You know, people search for freedom, and freedom doesn't necessarily mean always freedom from. We can never be free from certain aspects of life. Even saints and sages can't be free from a certain amount of pain or loss or death. They're all experiences in life. So the key is to be free in the experience, not be free from the experience. We all have experiences coming to us, and we may label them good, bad, or whatever, but the key is no matter what the experience is that we be free in it. You understand the difference? It's a very powerful thing. Oh, I want to be free from. No. Stepping through that door, you connect with a dimension of yourself where you're able to be free in whatever you're confronted with. Nothing moves you out of being that higher dimension of who you are. That's what we all want to get to. And so we all have the capacity for making a greater contribution to life. And there is something extraordinary that lives in all of us, and it's wanting to come forward. You know, I did a memorial service yesterday, and I can't mention the name of the person because I haven't asked the family, but this person was somebody I was very close to, and my family was close to. They were extended family. For the last 30 years, we celebrated Christmases and holidays and Thanksgivings and our birthdays, and this gentleman passed on. But the impact that he made on his family and me, the ripples, he stepped through a door because he went through an abusive childhood and he emerged out of that. He was told when he went to A&M that he should go back and be a dirt farmer. He wasn't bright enough to qualify to go to school. He went to A&I for a semester, returned back, and became a veterinarian, and he became the outstanding student of his class, decided by his professors his first year. He graduated with top of the class in honors. This man, I could go on and on about it, but one of the things that he did was he one time came to our bookstore 30-some years ago and bought a pamphlet called The Ultimate Secret. I think it's out of print. And in it had 10 things that were signs of inner peace. I'm going to read them to you now. This is what will move you through a door. When you move through the door, this is what it's like, because he lived this. He read it every day. He laminated it, put it in his pocket, and he would read it, try to live it every day. Number 1, a tendency to think and act spontaneously rather than on fears based on past experiences. 2, an unmistakable ability to enjoy each moment. 3, a loss of interest in judging other people. 4, a loss of interest in interpreting the actions of others. 5, a loss of interest in conflict. 6, a loss of the ability to worry. 7, frequent, overwhelming episodes of appreciation. 8, contented feelings of connectedness with others and nature. 9, frequent attacks of smiling. 10, an increased susceptibility to love and the uncontrollable urge to extend it. That was what he lived. And his ripples from living that and being with that daily went through the family and through friends, and it went through me. He made a big impact. So remember, behold, I have set before you an open door, and no man can shut it, Jesus said. But Jesus also said something else. He said, behold, I stand at the door and knock. And if any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come into him. What is the I that will come in? It's the higher Christ self that lives in you, that he sought to model and say is who you are. So ask for the divine to come into your heart, into your life. Do it daily, and you will never be the same. God bless you all.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. Unity is inclusive, welcoming people of all walks of life in dignity and love. We believe that love, strength, and goodness dwells within you. May we all live in unity with God, humanity, and all of God's creation. And remember, as Reverend Caesar says, life is meant to be good.